I never imagined finding myself entangled in something unexplainable, an unspoken connection that gradually formed between two individuals who should have never crossed that boundary. Noah, my husband's closest friend, a man I had known for years, frequently visited our home to discuss work matters with my husband, their laughter filling the living room. I had never viewed him in any other way until a single moment shifted everything. That day, my husband was away on a business trip, and I had not expected any visitors. Yet Noah arrived regardless, retrieving some forgotten documents. A light drizzle fell outside, and an unusual quietness settled over the house. We sat together, and conversation flowed more easily than I had anticipated. Then he asked me a simple question. Are you happy? The words left me breathless. I found myself at a loss for how to respond, but when I looked into his eyes, I knew he already understood. As he dozed off on the couch, I gently covered him with a blanket. It was a small, meaningless action until my fingers brushed against his hand. I stood motionless, startled by the unexpected sensation. I shouldn't have felt anything, yet I did. In the days that followed, I started noticing Noah more whenever he visited. The very atmosphere of the house seemed to shift. The way he looked at me, the moments our hands met by accident, each lasting slightly longer than necessary, were silent acknowledgments of something neither of us could ignore. Then, one afternoon, we found ourselves alone in the living room. He lingered, his gaze on me heavier than before. Are you happy? He asked again. I wanted to say yes, but the words wouldn't come. And this time, when his hand reached for mine, I did not withdraw. Neither of us spoke, but we both recognized that the line had been erased. I couldn't pinpoint when his gaze had changed, whether it had always been that way, waiting for me to take notice, or if it had shifted recently. That evening, Noah arrived later than usual. My husband was absent, and I assumed he would leave after retrieving the documents. But he stayed. Outside, the rain fell in a steady rhythm against the windows, merging with the stillness inside. The usual sound of laughter between two longtime friends was missing, replaced by an unspoken void. We sat in the living room, the television on, but neither of us paid attention to it. Our conversation unfolded naturally, no longer restricted to work-related topics or surface-level politeness. Then he asked me again if I was happy. The question made my throat tighten. It had been so long since I had considered my own happiness. I remained silent, but Noah didn't push for an answer. He simply leaned back, his gaze fixed on me, waiting. I stood up, walked to the closet, and grabbed a blanket. When I draped it over him, it should have been an insignificant gesture. But when my fingertips accidentally grazed his, warmth shot through me, making me freeze. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain he could hear it. I quickly pulled my hand away, wanting to believe it was just a fleeting moment, a trick of my imagination. But when I met Noah's eyes, I didn't see surprise or confusion. Instead, there was an unspoken understanding. The air between us felt too charged, too close. I knew I should have turned away, should have left, but I couldn't. I watched him exhale slowly. He said nothing, made no move that crossed the line, yet I could tell he was battling the same emotions I was. I rushed out of the living room, my heart still hammering. In the kitchen, I gripped the arms of a chair, struggling to steady my breath. But no matter how hard I tried to deny it, the truth was undeniable. The boundary had shifted, and the most terrifying part, I wasn't sure I wanted to stop it. I tried convincing myself it had been nothing more than a fleeting lapse in judgment, that the moment had only felt significant because of the quiet, the intimacy, the ease of misinterpretation. But even as I fought to suppress it, everything had changed. Noah started coming around more frequently. To an outsider, nothing seemed different. He still engaged in casual conversations with my husband, still assisted me in clearing the dinner table. But every time our eyes met, I knew he felt it too. One evening, I reached for a glass on the counter, unaware of how close Noah stood. When I turned, our hands brushed again. He hesitated just briefly before pulling away. We didn't speak of it, yet the unspoken weight of the moment made my world tilt in a way I couldn't control. Then, one afternoon, I was alone. My husband was away again on business, and the house felt eerily quiet. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when the doorbell rang, I knew before even opening it who would be there. Noah stood in the doorway, this time without any documents or an excuse to stop by. For several seconds, we merely stared at each other, neither of us speaking, yet everything was understood. He didn't ask if I was okay, nor did he question whether I wanted him to leave. The silence between us conveyed everything that needed to be said. I hesitated, torn between the knowledge of what crossing that final threshold meant and the undeniable pull between us. I knew that if I let him in, there would be no turning back. But then, despite every reason not to, I did the one thing I never thought I would. I found the strength to take the leap, stepping aside and leaving the door open. Noah entered slowly, his gaze fixed on me, as if waiting for me to reconsider. But I didn't. I shut the door behind him, and at that instant, I understood that the final boundary had been crossed. As the door clicked shut, an eerie silence filled the room. Noah stood before me, his eyes calm, patient, just waiting. I wasn't sure what I had anticipated. A word, a final hesitation, an excuse to retreat. But none of that came. We simply stood in the room we both knew so well. Yet, everything had changed. My heartbeat quickened, my breaths became uneven. I wondered if Noah noticed, but when he inhaled softly, as though struggling against his own restraint, I knew I wasn't the only one feeling it. He remained still, not reaching for me, yet there was something invisible between us, pulling us closer, the space shrinking with every passing second. I could stop now, just take a step back, offer a smile, make a joke, and pretend none of this had ever happened. I could push this feeling into the farthest corner of my mind and move on as if it never existed. But I didn't want to. I had spent so many years as a wife, a mother, the person everyone expected me to be, that I had forgotten I was still someone with my own desires. And tonight, I wasn't running away. Noah took a slow step forward, yet he didn't touch me. He was waiting. My breath grew heavier, the air thick with an unspoken intensity, so dense it felt tangible. My hand lifted, not a conscious choice, but a reflex, something my heart had decided before my mind could process it. My fingers barely brushed against the back of his hand, a touch so faint it might have gone unnoticed, but it meant more than any words ever could. I felt him tremble beneath my touch, and for what seemed like an eternity, neither of us pulled away. We had crossed the line, not with grand declarations or urgency, but with quiet acceptance of something we had long been avoiding. I didn't know what the future held, whether this moment would lead to regret, but in that instant, I didn't care. I wasn't sure exactly when we had crossed that delicate threshold. Maybe it was when I allowed myself to touch him without retreating. Maybe it was when our eyes conveyed more than words ever could. Or maybe it had begun long ago, through fleeting moments, subtle glances, and gestures that lingered just a little too long. The days that followed unfolded in a subtle shift that only the two of us could perceive. Noah continued to visit, speaking with my husband as though nothing had changed, but we both knew better. We never spoke of that moment in the living room, of that brief yet electric touch between two people who shouldn't have shared anything beyond polite conversation. But our silence carried the truth. Each time he stopped by, the air in the house grew heavier, though only I seemed to notice it. I began anticipating those visits far more than I should have. I reminded myself that I couldn't let this spiral out of control, yet every time Noah appeared, every time his gaze lingered on me, I felt myself slipping further. Then, one night, a storm swept through the city. My husband was away on business, my son asleep upstairs. Noah arrived later than usual, his clothes damp from the rain. I hadn't expected him, yet the moment I saw him standing at the door, I realized I had known he would come. We sat in the living room, the rain providing the only sound between us. He didn't ask if I was all right. He didn't suggest that he should leave. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, the motion both casual and dangerously familiar. "You don't have to be alone like this," he said quietly, his voice almost drowned out by the downpour. I turned away, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm not alone." The words were a lie. I had been alone for a long time. Noah knew that. And I knew he hadn't come just because of the rain. When he rose and stepped toward me, I didn't back away. When his hand brushed against mine, I didn't pull away. And when his lips met mine, I didn't turn away. We had gone too far. There was no way to undo it now. I thought we could continue like this indefinitely, but secrets have a way of coming to light. One afternoon, as I prepared dinner, my husband walked into the kitchen, his expression unreadable. "Noah's been stopping by a lot lately, hasn't he?" A chill ran through me. "He's my friend," I answered, keeping my voice steady. My husband nodded, yet a flicker of doubt surfaced in his eyes, something I had never seen before. That was when I knew things were beginning to unravel. Secrets don't stay hidden forever. The stolen glances, the lingering moments, the way I came alive in Noah's presence, the awkwardness that followed his departure. It had not escaped the notice of the man who had been beside me for years. I wasn't sure how much he had figured out, but I knew time was slipping away. I could still put an end to this, pretend it had never happened, salvage what remained of my family. Or I could let it continue, knowing it could only lead to heartbreak. Noah never pressured me to make a choice. He never said a word, but each time he looked at me, I felt the unspoken question. One night, as I stood at the door, seeing him off, his hand lingered on mine just a second longer than it should have. An unvoiced question, an invitation without words. I watched him walk away, feeling the war waging within me. For the first time in ages, I wasn't sure I wanted to say no. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if my husband would uncover the truth. I didn't know if Noah was the answer I had been searching for, or just a fleeting fantasy of a woman who had been numb for too long. But there was one thing I did know. No matter which path I chose, there was no going back. I had crossed that line, and I wasn't sure I wanted to return. That evening, unlike any other, I was in the process of washing dishes, enjoying a rare moment of quiet after my husband had gone out. As I was immersed in the piece, I suddenly felt a warm breath right behind me. I didn't hear the door open, nor did I hear any footsteps, just the feeling of him standing so close. It was my husband's friend, but he didn't speak, nor did he touch me, yet his presence was unmistakable. The silence lingered, and then, in a whisper, he asked, "You felt that too, right?" I should have left, but I stood frozen, and at that moment, everything shifted. My name is Emma Carter, 32 years old, living in a modest house in Brooklyn, New York, with my husband, Daniel. The soft glow of the kitchen lights from the pendant above the sink bathed the room in warmth. The sound of running water filled the air as I submerged my hands in the soapy water, the sensation of comfort spreading through my fingers. The night was unusually quiet, a rarity that I cherished. Daniel had just left, saying he needed to stop by the grocery store on Atlantic Avenue to pick up a few things for breakfast. I didn't ask for details. I just nodded and continued with the dishes. I always appreciated these moments when the house was mine alone. No TV, no endless chatter, just the peaceful quiet and the soothing rhythm of the running water. I sighed deeply, letting the warmth of the water relax my tense muscles, allowing my body to settle into a familiar, almost meditative routine. Pick up a dish, scrub it clean, rinse it, place it on the rack, and repeat. Outside, the streetlights cast a soft glow on the wet pavement, reflecting pale yellow streaks across the window. In the distance, the sound of honking horns echoed off the busy streets, a constant reminder that the city never truly rested. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, savoring the silence, before Daniel came back and life returned to its usual pace. But then, just when I thought I was entirely alone, an unexpected chill ran down my spine. I hadn't heard the door open, but something in the air, a strange, almost unexplainable feeling, made me freeze. A presence stood directly behind me. My body tensed, and instinct told me that someone was too close, too near. My breath hitched as a scent flooded my senses. Sandalwood and tobacco, familiar and unsettling. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Lucas Hale, Daniel's best friend from college. I gripped the wet plate in my hand, trying to maintain my composure. Logic told me I was probably just overreacting. Maybe Lucas had simply stopped by to say hello. But if that were true, why hadn't I heard him walk in? Why was he standing so close, his body's warmth pressing against my back? I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. "What are you doing here, Lucas?" A low chuckle vibrated against my neck, sending a shiver down my spine. "Just wanted to look at you." I frowned at the vague, unsettling response. I continued washing the dishes, trying to appear unaware of his every movement. But the silence between us stretched, thick and uncomfortable. It was as if an invisible tension hung in the air, tightening around us. His gaze was intense. Though I didn't meet his eyes, I could feel it, like a sharp knife against my skin. "You're so quiet for someone who just walked in," I said, my voice betraying the strain I was feeling. "I didn't want to bother you," he replied, his tone thick with sarcasm. I bit my lip, clutching the edge of the sink. The warmth of the water was no longer comforting. Lucas shifted behind me, just a small movement, but it was enough for me to sense that he had moved closer. I turned my head slightly, just enough to see him in my peripheral vision. The kitchen light cast sharp shadows across his face, his dark eyes locked on mine, filled with something I couldn't quite decipher. A slow smirk curled on his lips, as though he knew something I didn't. My stomach knotted with unease, the air around me thick with tension. I didn't like the way he was looking at me, standing so close, or the charged atmosphere that seemed to hang in the kitchen. I cleared my throat, trying to steady my breath. "Where's my husband?" I asked, my voice light, though the tension in it was impossible to hide. Lucas shrugged, his smile never fading. "Still out." He paused for a moment, then tilted his head slightly. "Thought you might want some company." My stomach tightened, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them. Like he knew exactly how they would affect me. Like he was testing me. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay composed. "I don't need anyone. I'm just washing dishes." My voice was firmer now, more controlled. Lucas leaned against the counter, his arms crossed over his chest, his eyes never leaving mine. "Do you always work this hard?" I forced a smile, trying to keep things light. "Someone has to clean up after dinner." But Lucas didn't smile. Instead, he tilted his head, his gaze slowly scanning my face, as if evaluating something. "I don't think Daniel appreciates you enough." I froze, turning completely to face him. My eyes met his, and he didn't answer immediately. He just stared at me, his gaze intense, as if searching for something deep inside me. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, sharper. He leaves you alone too much. The air in the kitchen grew heavier, and I tightened my grip on the sink handle, trying to keep my breathing steady. The boundary between us had been crossed, a fragile, invisible line that now felt almost broken. Lucas knew it, and I could feel it in the tense atmosphere that surrounded us. I turned back to the sink, attempting to focus on the sound of the running water, trying to remind myself that this was just a normal evening, just Lucas standing in the kitchen. But I couldn't shake the feeling. His presence, too close, hovering behind me. His warmth seeping through the fabric of my shirt. He shifted again, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. I clenched my jaw, part of me wanting to turn around, confront him, and make it clear that he should leave. But another part of me, the part that was deeper, more fearful, held me still. If I moved, if I looked at him, I might have to confront something within myself, something I wasn't sure I was ready to admit. After a long silence, I heard Lucas speak. His voice was slow and soft, as though each word had been deliberately chosen to settle in the space between us, carrying an unseen weight. I froze. "Stop what?" I asked, trying to maintain composure, but my voice lacked the steadiness it once had. Lucas didn't respond immediately. I could feel his gaze tracing along the back of my neck, contemplating something, before he took a step back. The sudden distance felt oddly unsettling. "Okay," he said, his tone unreadable. "See you later." I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath the entire time, and heard his footsteps fade into the stillness of the house. A moment later, the front door shut, and he was gone. I stood there, staring at the water flowing into the sink, attempting to calm my breathing. No matter how hard I tried, his presence lingered in the air, and deep down, I knew it wouldn't be the last time I felt him behind me. I clenched my fists, an unfamiliar emotion rising in my chest. A feeling that wasn't quite fear, but not exactly comfort either. I had thought it was over, but I was wrong. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps again, slow and cautious, returning. My heart raced as I spun around, half hoping it might be Daniel, perhaps having forgotten something and coming back for it. But no, it was Lucas. He stood in the doorway, his figure casting a shadow across the floor. His eyes remained fixed on me, unflinching, without a hint of hesitation or regret. I swallowed. "Why are you still here?" Lucas didn't answer immediately. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him with a firm, deliberate slam. The sound startled me. Lucas tilted his head slightly, his eyes darkening. His voice was light, but carried a dangerous undertone. "You forgot something." The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, more confining. I knew I should run, but my feet wouldn't move. "You should go," I said, my voice firmer than before, though I wasn't certain it had the strength to make him leave. A slow, almost lazy smile spread across his lips, not one of joy, but of knowing. "You feel it too, don't you, Emma?" I took a breath, feeling the boundary between us dissolve. Lucas moved closer, his steps slow and measured, until there was barely a breath of space between us. "He trusts you," he whispered, his warm breath grazing my cheek. maybe too much. I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to hold on to whatever control I had left. The air between us thickened, charged with an almost palpable tension. I felt his hand graze my arm, light, barely a touch, but enough to send a shiver down my spine. I should have pushed him away. I should have said something. But I stood frozen, his lips hovering so close to mine, waiting. Then, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway jolted me back to reality, like a splash of cold water. I froze, as did Lucas. We both realized what had almost transpired. I pushed him away, breathing heavily. Go now. Lucas looked at me for a long moment, his eyes dark, but he didn't argue. He stepped back, casting one final glance before disappearing through the back door. My hands trembled as I pressed them to my chest, trying to slow my erratic heartbeat. Moments later, the front door opened and Daniel walked in, blissfully unaware of what had just occurred. Baby, I got everything we need. I forced a breath and turned to face him, hiding the turmoil I felt inside. Daniel set the bags on the counter, wrapping his arms around my waist and pressing a kiss to my temple. Are you okay? You look a little flushed. I nodded quickly. Yeah, it's probably just the steam. Daniel chuckled. I told you not to overwork yourself. I tried to laugh along, but as I helped him unpack, I could still feel the lingering ghost of Lucas's touch on my skin. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. As we unpacked the groceries, my heart continued to race, and every time my hand brushed against a cold box or the smooth surface of a milk bottle, I flinched, as if the fragile barrier I had around myself might shatter. Daniel didn't notice anything unusual. He was laughing about something, perhaps the new neighbors, or a random story he heard on the radio. I nodded, chuckling at the right moments, but my mind was far away, caught in the memory of Lucas. His silence, his presence, the way he had positioned himself so close, the intensity of his gaze, as though he could read my thoughts before I could even form them, and worst of all, how my body had betrayed me. Nothing had really happened. I had pushed him away. I had told him to go. But what if Daniel's car hadn't come at that exact moment? What if I hadn't had a reason to stop it? The thought twisted my stomach, but I couldn't shake it. It lingered, an unsettling presence in my mind. Daniel reached out and hugged me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder. Are you sure you're okay? I stiffened for a brief moment before forcing myself to relax into his embrace. Yeah, just tired. Daniel kissed my neck lightly and returned to putting things in the fridge. I stood there, watching him as he busily arranged everything, completely unaware. He trusted me. He trusted Lucas. Guilt surged within me, rising like a tidal wave. I hadn't done anything wrong, but would it still be true if a part of me hadn't wanted Lucas to leave right then? I couldn't answer that question. In the days that followed, I tried to forget everything. I pretended it hadn't happened, like the touch on my wrist had been nothing but a trick of the mind, or that Lucas's breath so close to my lips hadn't been enough to alert me to the danger. But the truth was, I couldn't forget the way I sensed his presence before I even saw him, how he seemed to know exactly what I was thinking. It made erasing him from my mind impossible, and Lucas wouldn't let me forget. Every time I went to the store, I felt like someone was watching me. Whenever I passed the coffee shop near my house, I felt the weight of unseen eyes on me from across the street. One night, as I stood in the kitchen pouring water, I felt it before I saw him. My heart sank. I knew exactly where he was. I looked up and saw Lucas standing outside the kitchen window, shrouded in darkness. The faint glow of the streetlights allowed me to make out his features, his eyes sharp, and the corners of his mouth curled slightly, as if he knew precisely what I was feeling in that moment.